It started as a dare, something to pass the time during the endless, restless nights of summer. But by the end, we realised some legends aren't just stories, and some places should never be disturbed. It was the summer of 2009, and like most teenagers in a small town, we were desperate for something exciting to do. My friends, Kyle, Jenna, Brian and I, often heard stories about the Spire in the woods, a crumbling monument from an age no one could quite remember. Some said it was a beacon for lost spirits. Others claimed it was a gateway to something much darker. Most thought it was just a myth. But Kyle wasn't like most people. He was relentless, always pushing us to go further, to chase the unknown. And one night, he convinced us to look for the Spire. We all met up at the usual spot, the old gas station by the highway, just as the sun started to set. The air was thick and the wind had a chill to it, but Kyle was already excited, pacing around like a kid on Christmas Eve. He was always like that. "We're doing this tonight," he said, as if there was no other option. We piled into his truck, the engine humming to life as we sped down the narrow, winding road toward Ravenwood Forest. I remember feeling a strange excitement mixed with unease as the town grew smaller in the rearview mirror. But it wasn't until we turned onto the dirt path that led deeper into the woods that things started to feel off. At first, the woods felt alive in a comforting way, the hum of insects, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. But as we ventured deeper, an unnatural stillness fell over us. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Jenna was the first to notice it. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. At first we heard nothing, but then came a low rhythmic hum like chanting carried on the wind. Brian laughed nervously. "Probably just the wind, right?" But none of us believed that. "We're getting close," Kyle said, but his voice trembled just enough that we all noticed. The trees seemed to get thicker, the air heavier. We kept walking, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of moss beneath our feet. The forest was darkening with every step, and I had the distinct feeling that the trees were closing in on us, but we pressed on. And then we saw it, the Spire. It wasn't like anything we'd ever seen before. It rose out of the ground, tall and jagged, like a twisted monument to something ancient and forgotten. The stone was covered in moss, cracks running through it like deep, gaping wounds. But it wasn't just the Spire itself that was unsettling. It was the way the air around it felt. Thick, charged, like something was watching us. We stood there for a long time, not saying a word, just staring at it. The hum we'd heard earlier was now louder, almost deafening. It came from the Spire, reverberating in the air like a low, constant growl. I wanted to leave, but Kyle, of course, wouldn't let us. "Let's go closer," he said. "We need to get footage for the podcast." Jenna hesitated. "Kyle, I don't know. This doesn't feel right." But Kyle was already moving toward the base of the Spire. Brian followed reluctantly, and Jenna and I, well, we didn't want to be left behind. We reached the base of the Spire, and that's when it happened. The ground beneath our feet seemed to shift, as if the earth itself was alive. And then it felt like the world went silent. No birds, no wind, no hum from the Spire. Just an oppressive silence. I remember feeling something press against my chest, like the weight of 1,000 eyes watching me. The air around the Spire was colder now, like we were standing in the mouth of something that was about to devour us. And then we saw it. At first it was just a shadow, but then it moved, quick and unnatural, like it was sliding across the ground, creeping up the Spire. It was the shape of a figure, tall, thin, with long limbs that bent at unnatural angles. Its face was covered in shadow, but the eyes were unmistakable. They were glowing, piercing through the darkness, locking onto mine. "Run!" I screamed, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like the ground itself was holding me in place. Kyle, always the brave one, was the first to move. "We need to get out of here," he yelled, pulling us away from the Spire. But it didn't matter. The thing in the shadows was already moving toward us, its limbs stretching unnaturally long. We ran through the forest, but no matter how fast we moved, we couldn't shake the feeling that it was right behind us. The branches reached out like claws, and every step felt like we were sinking deeper into the earth. The humming returned, louder than before, reverberating through our bones. And then, as suddenly as it began, the noise stopped. The forest fell quiet again. But the sense of dread, the pressure in the air, remained. We made it back to Kyle's truck, our breath ragged, our hearts pounding in our chests. None of us spoke. We didn't need to. We all knew what had happened. The spire, it was no ordinary structure. It was a beacon, a signal to something dark and ancient that had been waiting for someone, anyone, to come close enough. And we had. Now it wasn't over. The thing we'd seen in the woods, it was following us, watching us. We didn't go back to Ravenwood. We didn't even talk about it after that night. But I know it's still out there waiting. And every time the wind picks up, I swear I hear that hum, closer now. Some legends aren't just stories. Some places should never be disturbed. Do you believe in the Spire? Do you think it's still out there, waiting for the next unsuspecting group to stumble upon it? Let me know what you think in the comments below. But be careful. Some things are better left undisturbed. Like this video if you felt that chill down your spine, and subscribe to the Book of the Dread for more terrifying tales. Who knows, the next story might be closer to home than you think. Don't forget to hit the bell icon because you never know, you might be next.